Dobriansky with us. That was such a fantastic panel. And again, just outstanding panelists for discussion on trade and the energy transition. So our next panel is also going to touch to a large degree on global trade, but we're going to zoom in on trade and cooperation in nuclear energy technologies. So for those of you who are just tuning in, I'm Jennifer Gordon, and I'm the Managing Editor and Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. I am so happy to introduce our next panel discussion, which is our third nuclear-focused panel at the forum this year, New Global Opportunities for Nuclear Energy. I'm looking forward to this conversation in which we'll be covering different regional requirements and interest in nuclear energy technologies, nuclear energy financing, and international civil nuclear cooperation. First, I'm delighted to introduce our panelists. Marcelo Gomes da Silva, head of the new project development department at Electronuclear Brazil. Cosmin Ghita, the CEO of Nuclearelectrica in Romania. Collins Juma, Chief Executive Officer of Nuclear Power and Energy Agency in the Republic of Kenya. Ambassador Laura Holgate, the Vice President of Materials Risk Management at the Nuclear Threat Initiative. John Hopkins, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of NuScale Power, and Kalev Kallemets, Chief Executive Officer of Fermi, Energia in Estonia. So I'd like to start off by asking our panelists to each give a snapshot from their own unique vantage point of the international nuclear energy market. And Laura, I would like to start with you and ask, the global nuclear market is expected to triple by the middle of this century. So why is it that nuclear energy right now is having this global renaissance?
I think it really comes down to climate. I think so many countries are focusing on their commitments under the Paris Accords or other forms of political commitment, or just recognizing the importance of climate issues for their country, whether from a health perspective or a environmental perspective, or all the different ways in which climate is impinging upon how countries, manage their overall economies. So the opportunity for another form of clean energy alongside solar, wind, hydro, other types of renewables is really, I think, a big motivation, because nuclear can fill roles that the other renewables can't, that other clean energies are not able to fill, whether it comes to baseload or whether it comes to load following or other applications, such as the importance of clean water and desalination, whether it's process heat to support industry, whether it's hydrogen down the road as we look to decarbonize the transportation components of our economies. These new reactor types that are coming in, the Generation 4 reactors, offer a lot of diversity of application beyond what was possible before. So I think not only are you seeing countries looking for new sources of clean energy, but you're also seeing new ways for nuclear energy to fill needs and niches within these new economies.
Thank you, Laura. And that's a perfect, I think, pitch to the next question, which is, as you're talking about the niche that nuclear energy can fill, and I really want to do a deep dive, almost country by country here, and we have such a great opportunity with so many people gathered from so many different time zones to really get into this. But I want to ask Marcelo Gomes, why does nuclear energy make sense in Brazil? Brazil has hydropower and solar and wind. So what's that niche that nuclear is going to fill in Brazil?
Hello, and good evening, good morning, everyone. Yes, Brazil is a developing country, and as such, we have a huge demand for a new infrastructure, for sewage, water treatment, education, lighting, and so on. So there's a big pressure for new megawatts on the grid year by year. As the country evolves, as the industry grows, and the cities get more dense, and you need to have more services to the population. If you have a country like Brazil, which actually has a lot of hydro resources, but there's a big pressure, environmental pressure against new developments. You can't flood large areas anymore. So we are somehow restricted to renewables like solar, wind, and stick to the hydro we have, or just without reservoirs. And we have to grow. Brazil doesn't have much coal, and so nuclear is a very important option for the country, for a country like Brazil, to put new megawatts, to put on the grid to face the development of the country, right? We also have a issue that's quite recent on climate change. When a country has such large dependence on hydro as Brazil has it, so we used to be over 80%, now we are 60% hydro. We're very sensitive to the hydrology of years. We have some dry years, we have some rainy years, and what we are seeing now is that more and more it's getting drier and drier, which means that the affluences, the amount of water we have on the rivers is not reflecting what we used to have in the past. So there's also this pressure that we are starting to see, and of course we need base load. And so if you put everything together, we need for economically viable base load that brings safe security in supply. And this way, nuclear has an important role in the country and in the region, I should say.
Thank you, Marcelo. That's so interesting, because we talk and we focus so much on what our energy system, what our power system is doing to the environment. And then we don't often think about the flip side, which is what does the environment do to the available sources of energy? So when you talk about hydropower and how that's impacted by the environment. So I think that's just absolutely fascinating. Thank you. I want to pose a question to Collins. How did Kenya recognize the need for nuclear power in its energy mix?
Thank you, Jennifer. I want to say that we are also going through the same route that Brazil is taking. We also have some little drops of solar and wind and other renewables. But how we came to the discussion on the table for nuclear is that Kenya aspired at that time, that was around 2008, to become a middle income economy like Malaysia and Singapore. And we had designed projects, and we call them flagship Vision 2030 flagship projects that would enable us to reach where we wanted to go, or where we want to reach by the year 2030. And having done that, we looked at what would be the enablers, because infrastructure would be an enabler to such a vision, and then energy is a big component. Then having identified energy as an enabler, then we also look at the sources we had at that time, and we've been over-dependent on hydropower. And our experience is not very good with hydropower because of the hydrology. So when the weather variability goes down, we also have, we don't have enough power. And that time, 2008 also, we had discovered the potential of geothermal power. Actually, we are one of the largest producers of geothermal in Africa. So we did a crunch of numbers on what the potential of geothermal, how far can we stretch our hydro, what would be the possible generation from coal, and we were talking of imported coal. And then at that time also we just had the Paris conference on capping on coal generation. And then we looked at if we do additional wind and solar, not given that they are not base load. So in terms of industrialization, we can't really depend on wind and solar. And then we thought of how about nuclear for long term? because we found that with the potential we have in hydro, with the potential in geothermal, and what we could generate from coal, we would still need a baseload generation when it comes to industries. And we decided that for long term we start nuclear program, and that's what we've been doing for the last 8-9 years. So that when we reach that stage, then nuclear takes a long time. So if it takes a lead time of 10-15 years, you don't want to reach there, then you start a journey of another 10-15 years. That's how we arrived at this decision. And I would say that it's progressing well. And given the ups and downs of development of nuclear in any country, I think the graph is gradually going up. Thank you.
Thank you, Collins. And I think one thing that jumped out to me in your remarks just now was when you said we crunched the numbers, and that this made sense. And because I think that oftentimes, at least maybe this is just in the United States, but we talk all the time about the high upfront costs of nuclear energy. But then when you drill down just a little deeper and people say, oh, we crunched the numbers, and I think the answer is right there. So that said, I want to go to Kalev and say to you, again, we sort of have this view that in the EU, nuclear is extremely unpopular. But my question is it possible that the door might still be open specifically for SMRs?
Yeah, well, it's definitely going to be a struggle because in European Union, we do have member states that are truly, for internal political reasons, strongly anti-nuclear, and one of those nations is Austria, that creates problems for Czech Republic and Slovakia and Slovenia, and probably also for Cosmin in Romania, and there are some few others. So that doesn't go away. So there will be no European coherent policy on nuclear for decade to come, I'm pretty confident. However, we are free nations still to make up our own mind, and the reality in European Union is that we have carbon pricing, and climate neutrality goal will be legally binding by 2050, which is really, really soon when we talk energy infrastructure. So currently, early this year, the carbon price in Europe is 35 euros per ton, and it's moving upwards. And it's because of the COVID crisis, because of the money printing, and it goes to the assets like Tesla and other assets that are related to climate. And a CO2 emission right is one of those long-term assets that is a safe bet, meaning that when Estonian government foresee the carbon pricing just 2 years ago, they predicted that in 2030, the carbon price will be 35. Now we're 2021, right? And expectation for the end of this year is beyond 40. So it's really serious. And what is also serious and clear is that renewable build-out is strongly below expectations. It is much more challenging to move from some wind, some solar to significant wind, significant solar. So this step up is also being recognized, and I'm extremely pleased that the new government which will be formed under the first female prime minister in Estonia recognizes the potential of SMRs. And I'm really pleased also that in Europe, at least by some utilities, there is a wake up at the potential of SMRs as compared to the large nuclear, which really makes many governments and utilities fringe on thinking that I have to invest $7 billion. That really, well, is very problematic.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kalev, for that great snapshot. And I want to turn to Cosmin and ask you from Romania, is that sort of your view as well, or what do you have to either add or, perhaps argue with in what Kalev just said?
Well, let me quickly touch base on and restate what has been said by everyone here. Decarbonization without nuclear is impossible. And there is no ESG core without decarbonization. So we're right at the very center of ESG financing. You want to have a sustainable environment, you want to have a clean energy future, nuclear needs to be part of it. And then it should be rightfully recognized and rewarded as such. We're going to see about $1 trillion as a market, as a potential investment check for adopting ESG standards worldwide. Now, if we were to go back to half a step, the EU taxonomy and the role it plays in defining nuclear energy as a sustainable form of development is critical. And it is unfortunate that to this moment, we haven't managed to include nuclear as part of the taxonomy of the various sources of production that can be deemed as sustainable, simply because of ways in which the classification is done. But I'm very sure that this will happen. And by understanding SMRs, as well as current nuclear, for example, for Romania, the nuclear program helped save 20 million tons per year. So we were almost 150 million tons of CO2 saved through 2 candle reactors that were operating at Chernobyl. I think that financing will become much more accessible in this sense. However, we all need to cooperate between ourselves and really understand the fact and the scientific truth, rather than take other bureaucratic considerations in doing our evaluation.
Great. Cosmin, that was terrific. And now that we've kind of talked about the why of nuclear, Cosmin, both from you and then also picking up on what Laura said in the beginning in her remarks, and then gone around this room, of international experts, I want to go to John Hopkins and say, as a US company, which emerging markets do you think hold the most potential for NuScale? And, where are you looking and what are you looking for when you survey the international landscape?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Again, let me start off by saying thank you for the invite tonight. I've only been with NuScale now for 8 years, and I came out of an industry where we built and invested in offshore wind and PV solar. And I can remember coming in, when I mentioned the small modular reactor or advanced reactor, a short 8 years ago, most people would either roll their eyes or they say it's all about economies of scale and it's only about large. And in a short 8 years, I now see when I go to IAEA conferences, banners that says large is now the niche, it's all about small. And there's a lot of reasons, I believe, for that. And we've been very fortunate, and NuScale had a milestone year this year in August of 2020. We have completed the Nuclear Regulatory Commission phase 6. So we're essentially in the process of going out and building plants. We currently have our first customer in the United States who just signed our contracts. We got our first task order, and this will be our first site will be at Idaho National Lab, and it'll be with the Utah Association of Municipal Power. And the contractor will be Fluor Corporation, who's a private investor into the NuScale. But it's been a daunting challenge to get where we are. Now that we have gone through the NRC process, we're seeing a lot of interest around the world. It was mentioned earlier, in terms of the EU, of the 27 countries in the EU, I don't know how many exactly, 14, 16 do have nuclear power. And we're getting calls from Central and Eastern Europe, and predominantly for 2 reasons. It was stated earlier. One is energy security, and the other one is climate disruption and the impact as it relates to carbon tax initiatives within the EU. So we currently enjoy memorandums of understanding with 5 countries within Central and Eastern Europe, as well as Sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East. So when I look at where the market is, it's really about who has, in terms of timing, our intent is my first plant will be 8 modules, each module 77 megawatts. Once I get my first module up and running, that's my pilot plan to be able to show I can be cost certain, the economics are going to support this, and I will move into number 2 and number 3. When I was asked by the Kazakh president about, and it always comes down to commercial reality. Are you going to be commercially viable? Right now, where we are, I've scaled up everything in our small reactor. Our fuel is less than 5% fuel that's been used around the world. We have a very robust supply chain globally. We're working with, and we have suppliers who are investing in us. Doosan out of Korea, Sargent Lundy out of the US, Sarens now out of Belgium. And where I'm looking at is our primary focus is within the US, it's going to be areas of probably the Northwest where fossil fuel plants are being shut down. And, hopefully we're going to be able to come in and say our emergency planning zone is outside boundary limits. So we've already done all the analysis on creating jobs for those communities. And I think it's going to be very similar in other parts of the world. Now, where we're getting interest, most of it's for electricity use, but the applications, and I heard today when I was listening to some of my associates in the other industry, in the other reactor business, it's heat, it's providing energy for process heat, for desalination. The new one that's on the block right now is hydrogen production we were just talking about. NuScale has been working with INL since 2014 on providing the economics associated of using a NuScale module in the production of hydrogen. And now we're looking at low temperature as well as high temperature. So where it's going to come, I'm not sure where my second plant's going to be, but it's probably going to be in that part of the world I just mentioned, Africa, Middle East, or Central Europe.
Thanks, John. That's just a fascinating look at how you look at the world from the US. But also I want to say that your remarks just now picked up on the first of our 3 nuclear panels, which was last night. We looked at nuclear beyond power and applications of nuclear for hydrogen, heat, and desalination. So, and then I should also say the second of our 3 nuclear panels over the course of the Global Energy Forum was this afternoon, and it was on nuclear innovation and what the next 10 years will look like in nuclear energy. So I think that this panel really is tying a bunch of those threads together. And I want to keep doing that and do kind of, again, a deep dive on new reactors, but specifically, again, from the standpoint of what the new reactors mean for international cooperation and for international development and trade. So I want to go again to you, Laura. We've talked a lot about this notion of security by design in the context of the new reactors. And can you say more about what security design means and why it matters?
Well, these new reactors differ from the large gigawatt scale reactors that dominate the global energy market right now on the nuclear front in many ways. And they have different fuel types, they have different enrichment levels of those fuels, they have different fuel forms. They will need new facilities to make their fuel and to manage the spent fuel that comes out of the back end. And these are in many cases different, not so much NuScale, because NuScale is, as John said, is building on an existing global supply chain. But a lot of these other reactor types do have whether it's the TRISO fuel in a billiard ball shaped fuel element, or whether it's liquid metal fuels that some reactors are talking about. These are very, very different from the standard, gigawatt scale light water reactor that is the backbone of not just the nuclear energy production world, but also the global guidance on how to use those reactors safely and securely. And so there's going to be a significant change that's already happening in the US and Canada, a little bit in the UK, on the regulatory front on how to apply principles to new types of technology. And the most important thing that can be done is to really take advantage of the fact that these are still, still in the process of being designed and licensed and built And we can make changes now to make sure that they are secure by design, in addition to the safety and the economics that are being designed into them. You know, people think about nuclear security as being a very expensive component of nuclear energy, but that's primarily because it's been added on post facto to the generation 3 and 3+ reactor types. The major changes in our understanding about nuclear security happened well after those reactors were designed. And so the security improvements have been glued on in a way. If those can be built in, then you can not only make them less costly, but you can also then have that be a selling point of the reactor, that it is in fact easier to secure and protect. The other thing that's different about these reactors is that they're going into new parts of the world, countries that may have less experienced regulatory processes, that may be in areas that are more susceptible to conflict. And so the environment in which these reactors may be used is also going to be quite different. So all of these argue for taking the time now to pay attention to how do we design in security, not just in the reactor, but in the fuel cycle itself, to make sure that these reactors can be securely deployed globally at the scale that will be necessary for them to make the difference that needs to be made on the climate side.
Thank you, Laura. That was such a fascinating overview. And I want to kind of go around the room again and just get a sense of how everyone on this panel is thinking about, these issues and, as they look to each of their own countries' nuclear energy programs. So Marcelo, I want to go to you and just ask, as you think about the types of nuclear that Brazil is developing, are you focusing more, to what extent are you focusing on extending the operation and capacity at Angra Unit 1, or are you really more focused at this point on advanced nuclear reactors?
Okay, so for the present, we are working very, very hard on the life extension of Angra 1, because it's a big issue. It's quite economical if you have an operating plant and you can extend its lifetime by 20 more years. It's wonderful, right? And we are concluding a new plant, Angra 3, which is a twin of Angra 2. These are the big projects that are going on in Brazil right now. For the expansion, the new nuclear generation, we have just recently issued a new 2050 plan. The country has issued a 2050 energy plan, and it sees there's room for expressive new nuclear generation, in some cases up to 10 gigawatts. Depending on the deployment of new solar and wind and so. So there's a lot of room for new nuclear in the country. We still see the backbone of this expansion as in large pressurized water reactors, right? But has been recently a lot of interest in small modular reactors. For some regions of Brazil, it makes a lot of sense, especially if you look at the north of the country. When you go to the Amazon area, you have some very large cities there that are isolated from the rest of the country. You can't cross the forest with transmission lines. It's very complicated, environmentally speaking. So there's a lot of sense in using small modular reactors in that region. And in fact, at the end of 2020, we had a blackout in one of those cities there. It was a very difficult issue because some large transformer that supplied the cities, they had some issues. And we had many days in a complete blackout in the city, which is, we can't admit that. In the 21st century, right? So there's a lot of sense for small modular reactors in that area as well. As a whole, I think just to throw an idea, I think that it would benefit a lot the industry in the world if we had some sort of global regulation or approval for small modular reactors, just like you have in the aviation industry, where you can certify an airplane and fly it in many countries. If you try to build up the infrastructure for licensing reactors in every country, I think it's a difficult thing. It's not very efficient. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcelo. And I love that comparison to the aviation industry. Collins, I want to go to you and ask, you've talked about phasing in small reactors while monitoring Kenya's electricity grid. So can you give us a sense of where you're at in that process and the types of nuclear reactors that you feel are most appropriate for Kenya?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. I think I gave my story up to when we made a decision that we want to include nuclear in the energy mix. But now the initial thought was that the GDP would grow to some extent that by the year 2030, we shall have had an expanded grid. You know, the energy consumption and GDP, the graph is almost similar. So that was the thinking that time, but due to world economic constraint, that has not happened. So we had to do a paradigm shift, because initially we thought of 4,000 megawatts by the year 2030 in terms of the fleet of 1,000, and the last 1,000. But the way the economy has grown, and to that extent, the way our grid has grown, we find that this might not be achievable. So we've shifted our thought to small modular reactors, and for four good reasons: that the flexibility within the grid, that is if you have a small grid, and the construction time, and grid accommodation. And maybe the last one, if John allows me, is the cost. But that is a discussion that maybe we'll have later. So because of those reasons, we've had a paradigm shift to consider having small modular reactors. And we've done a reactor technology assessment for both large power reactors and the modular reactors. Now, this is not only for Kenya in the sub-Saharan Africa, but I think most of the grids in this region are small grids. And I think the SMR has come at the right time, where countries that maybe in terms of capacity and in terms of financial might not be able to afford the large reactors in terms of those factors I've just mentioned, might turn to modular reactors. And I think many will follow suit. Those are the reasoning that has taken place to make us reach such a decision that we consider the small modular reactors. We know the NuScale is leading in this, where then we have the smart reactor from Korea. And I think Chinese are also doing their bit on that. But we've not really made a decision of which particular reactor we want to install. What we have in principle is that we are likely to go to small modular reactors. So that's the decision that is currently being reviewed.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Again, just looking at different grids and at the grid of any particular country and saying, well, what makes the most sense here? So, Kalev, I know your answer on SMRs. I know that you're extremely supportive and bullish on SMRs. And my question to you is, do you kind of come to that conclusion either because of the technology itself, or do you think that there's an extent to which SMRs have a unique ability to attract private capital, and that also that once you bring in the financing angle, that's also kind of a case that can be made for SMRs in comparison to, say, light water reactors or something traditional?
No, it's very simple. It's economics. Like I said, the carbon price right now is 35. When I did my PhD, the price 18 months ago, the price was 15, and I saw based on the numbers that I did, that it will go where it is today. Not so soon, but the price has to go to 80 by 2040 to reach the European goals. And it is absolutely recognized that in Europe, the easiest way to decarbonization is electrification in transportation and heating, but also in other industrial sectors, meaning the power demand goes up. And this is the primary. This is absolutely the primary demand. And it is impossible to invest into natural gas. It is impossible to invest into coal in Europe if you're really doing the numbers and understanding what are the consequences of the policies that have been adopted already. So it is only possible to do non-carbon emitting sources. And you know, like I said, renewable doesn't cut it, and it doesn't have the security of supply element. So when we are in Estonia and the Baltics, where we have right now -7 degrees outside and, well, very little sun, latitude 59, I mean, it's no-brainer. We're like Canada, Sweden, and Finland. They have nuclear, we have to have nuclear as well. It is just up to the capability of organizing and doing it. I would pour a little bit cold water on the argument of advanced nuclear. No, we have to do nuclear now. We can't wait. We have to get projects moving on based on light water systems where we have the training, regulatory system in place, supply chain in place. So the decisions made in the States by UAMPS, by OPG, hopefully also in UK on Rolls-Royce design are hugely important for the deployment nations to see credible technologies with credible budgets to move into business. But if you're moving, looking at Europe, we have something like 50 giga of capacity going out of the window next 15 years, like coal and natural gas, but also old nuclear. That has to be replaced and added up additional capacity. So it's we have to get multiple new projects moving in many nations in Europe, and I'm seeing pretty good awakening by some companies that are within or closest partners of Fermi Energia, Vattenfall, Fortum, and Tractebel, and so there is awakening.
Thank you, Kalev. And I want to again go to Cosmin and ask you for your view, again from Romania. And do you see SMRs as the next step? And to what extent do you feel, because I know you're also extremely interested, you know, in this question of nuclear energy finance. So how do you kind of see, you know, bringing in new nuclear and also bringing in the finance piece?
Well, I'm going to talk in my capacity as a CEO of a nuclear operator who is currently in the process of completing a vision that was started years ago with 4 large Candu type reactors, but keeps a close and impatient eye on the gift of new nuclear technologies. And realistically, what better time would be to open a gift if not the present? And it's for that reason that we have signed an MOU with NuScale for knowledge sharing and basically buttressing our understanding of these new technologies. And we've also accessed a USTDA grant of $1.2 million to identify the new sites that would be credible to SMRs. For Romania, as I previously mentioned, nuclear is part of the decarbonization package, and it has been for a long period of time. So we will be looking to grow. The new technologies that come in, they do offer a lot of other benefits on top of enhanced security, load following, and also possible cogeneration in hybrid systems. It's something that is actually a dream come true if you are to look at environmental considerations and decarbonization. You have resilient energy production with 0 emissions, and that is why we feel that from a finance standpoint, it should be rewarded as such. because it has added benefits through increased uptime, and also it can give you all types of cogeneration benefits that would make this a very worthwhile investment. Now, this modularity of SMRs might make it even much easier to deploy capital into it than large infrastructure, because the capex is required into various tranches, and you don't have a one-time, let's say, large ticket. The question would be is managing completion risk, and I think that through modularity and having repeated forms of construction and multiple construction, you can manage that completion risk. That is one of the largest impediments to access private financing into the nuclear space.
Thank you. And I want to go to John and continue on this question of finance. What is international co-financing look like? Again, from your standpoint, and I know you mentioned before, kind of some of the international partners that you work with at NuScale, but, are you looking at co-financing builds, in third-party countries with our established civil nuclear allies? Are you actively seeking foreign investment in U.S. projects? What do you think of when you think of international co-financing and financial cooperation?
I'm often asked, Jennifer, who is our competition outside the United States? And, my immediate answer generally is state-owned enterprises who do have the ability to do wraparound financing. And fortunately, recently, as last year, the US IDFC, International Development Corporation, had dropped their nuclear prohibition and are stated they will finance. I read just 2 days ago, I think it was, a memorandum of understanding between the Japan Bank of International Cooperation and IDFC to finance, and within their portfolio, they mentioned advanced reactors also financing. So, will those type of entities help us, in terms of totally level the playing field? No, but it's increasingly important for us to have that additional air in our quiver when we go to these countries and say we can help finance. We also have Ex-Im Bank that has a quorum now. We'd hope to get at some point in time the World Bank to take in consideration that these developing countries have specific needs and they should drop their nuclear prohibition, and we need them help to get there. And we've been talking to them, and I think we're making some inroads. So that financing capacity that you mentioned is very important for our technologies going forward in many of these countries.
Thank you, John. And I'm so glad that you mentioned these developments in the last few years that we've seen, especially DFC and Ex-Im. And I think, I don't know about you, but I think a few years ago, if you'd said what's on your policy wish list, a lot of people would have said, those two right up at the top. So it's been really, just incredible to see that happen. I do want to stay on this notion of international civil nuclear cooperation and ask Laura, what does that look like to you? And you can stay on the co-financing or you can move into IAEA or take this question in whatever direction you wish.
Well, I think there's multiple layers of international cooperation that are going to be required. The financing that John just mentioned is, I think, essential, and it's great to see these new tools in the U.S. to allow us to compete more effectively on the global scale. Marcelo mentioned the potential for collaboration among regulators to provide a common regulatory structure for some of these new reactor types that are coming online. That's an exciting opportunity. The International Atomic Energy Agency is obviously the centerpiece of international cooperation. I think there's a lot they need to do to bring the safeguards requirements that will exist for the vast majority of countries that operate these new types of reactors, and to think about the application, as I mentioned earlier, of security requirements as they apply to new technologies. There's also the potential to follow the path of the low enriched uranium bank that the IAEA owns and operates on behalf of its member states to think about applying that to new fuel cycle facilities that might be needed, or other aspects of the new requirements for these different types of reactors, or for the spread of existing reactor technologies. And so I think international cooperation is going to be right at the heart of this, as it should be. That's a good thing. The more countries understand about how each other is using nuclear energy and the environment in which they're applying it, the more secure and confident we can be that it's being used for peaceful purposes and not diverted to, other illicit activities.
Thank you, Laura.
Jennifer?
Yes.
I think the ambassador was spot on the comments of, and we're seeing start of collaboration. Recently, the NRC, US NRC, and Canada have formed an MOU to accept certain data between two countries, and that's a big start. We have a real champion, and the NEA Director General Bill Magwood has been trying to promote, again, from a regulatory perspective, some continuity between countries to come together to help enhance and promote the regulatory process. So we're starting to see it happen within specific countries. And I hope again, I'd love to see the UK with their GDA process do similar, working with the US, Canada, et cetera, and form some sort of consortia in that regard. So we're seeing progress there.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you, John, and I want to stay, I think, on that regulatory piece and international harmonization, and go back to you, Marcelo, because you sort of introduced this notion into this conversation. And I want to ask, do you have more to add, or is there anything else that you would add to that, any other pieces of that international cooperation puzzle?
Well, nuclear industry has international cooperation from the start, right? We, for example, we are an operating company. We do operating reviews abroad, and people from other operating organizations come to make peer review on our plants. There's an intense flow and exchange of information, of operational experience, design experience. I think it's an industry that is very strong on international cooperation, especially on the operating side. If you look at some what we call vendor countries, countries that sell nuclear power plants, they have, most of them, they have cooperation programs, very aggressive cooperation programs. They establish nuclear universities, training programs for establishing regulatory bodies on other countries. This is also very interesting. Of course, it's a commercial interest behind all that. But I think that, as I said, nuclear industry international cooperation is very, very strong. I think IAEA plays a major role on that as a common place for exchange of ideas or establishing regulations. And it's always it's a very tough job to accommodate all the different commercial interests, national interests, but they do a wonderful job on that. And I think that we should see that coming more and more, as I put in that idea of harmonization of regulation for small reactors. And I think also for sharing operational experience, formation, training of operators. There's a lot of grounds that, of course, we can have larger international cooperation, both on an international basis, but also on regional as well. I think countries, if you take a specific region like Latin America or Africa, they're culturally very close countries, and they have similar issues, and they can share their experience together. And I think this is very exciting for the industry as a whole.
Collins, I want to go to you and ask a similar question. What does international cooperation look like to you, and what are you looking for from international civil nuclear partners?
Yeah, I think my colleague from Brazil has said it all, because nuclear, the key words in nuclear is peer review and global cooperation. And I said that when we made this decision in 2008, I think the first step or the first stop was IEA, when we went to get the guidelines on how member states are guided on how to develop the nuclear power program. And after looking at all the 19 infrastructure issues and carrying out a pre-feasibility study and doing a peer review through inner mission, then we realized that we want to learn from those who've done it well, and that's when we started signing MOUs. We signed MOU with Korea, we signed MOU with China, Ghana. We had a framework arrangement with the US, which we are now formalizing through a government-to-government MOU. So we realized that cooperation is the in thing and the key thing in a nuclear power program, especially for the newcomer countries. But I believe also for the countries that are also adding their fleet, I think cooperation is still key to them. I want to say that we've really benefited from these cooperations, and especially the technical advice from the TC department in the IEA, and also from our development partners, because at least in nuclear, you may know something that the other person doesn't know. And I would say that going forward, cooperation is the word in the nuclear world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Kalev, I want to ask, and I know you had your hand up just a moment ago, so your thoughts on international civil nuclear cooperation. Yeah,
we're cooperating a lot in Europe, as we are, most of us are relatively small countries, and I'm cooperating also with Cosmin, our Romanian friends, and Czechs, and Irish, and Dutch, and so forth. And very closely, I'm having every week at least two discussions with our American partners of different companies and organizations. But I would, John mentioned well how Russia is able to finance nuclear. But look how, and remember how nuclear started with Eisenhower's speech, right? So what needs to be happening again is, from United States perspective, is national leadership on nuclear selling. So Mr. Putin is selling Russian reactors. Mr. Macron is selling French reactors. So if America wants to again be a global leader, your president has to be involved. You have to understand how serious nuclear energy is for any nation for deployment as well. It is not a commercial decision only. So it's a serious thing. And that has to be felt. That has to be felt by the national leadership. So, I mean, that is something that has to be relearned, I believe, in United States, apparently. Yeah, cooperation is extremely important also in licensing. But we have to realize what is the regulation in the world when it comes to International Atomic Energy Agency and also European regulations. So the regulatory independence is the rule, and therefore we have developed in Estonia, together with our Finnish partners, a framework for SMR licensing, which would utilize to maximum extent the country of origin safety assessment report. And that is something we're combining common agreement on with the other companies intent on deploying new nuclear or SMRs in Europe. But yeah, I think nuclear is really serious. Okay, it is related so much to politics, so much to the national leadership decisions. So United States leadership has to be serious, understanding that if they want to be regaining that position, that has only one consequence. There has to be full international commitment at the leadership level. That is how it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalev. And so we have about 4 minutes left, and you brought up the American president and his role in international nuclear energy. So with the time that we have remaining, I want to do just a quick lightning round, go around the room and ask, what signals are each of you looking for from the new Biden-Harris administration? So let's start again with Laura.
So I'm looking at the folks who've been named, whether it's John Kerry or Gina McCarthy or Jennifer Granholm, to the key roles. And so far, they are not known for a particular perspective very much on these nuclear issues. So I'm going to be looking at the staffs there to see who they bring on and see, are they ready to play the kind of leadership role that Kalev really accurately points out is going to be critical.
That's a great point, Laura. I should say, raise your hand if you've ever Googled John Kerry nuclear or Jennifer Granholm nuclear. I think that's most of us on this call. Marcelo, what are you looking for from the new U.S. administration?
Well, I think that an important change is that the U.S. is coming back to the Paris Agreement. So environmental, the climate change issues are important. This is very good news for nuclear as a greenhouse-free energy source. And I also expect that international cooperation also continues in nuclear. We have an important program with US right now, and I hope it continues in this administration.
Thank you, Marcelo. Collins, what are you looking for from the US administration?
Yeah, I think the climate change mitigation is key, as has just been mentioned, and I think it's good US is coming back to the table on this issue. But not only that, I hope the new administration, when I listened keenly last night, the speech was, it gave an array of hope that maybe we could go back to those days when the US government plays a major role in the nuclear industry. I think there's been a lull for some time because companies like Westinghouse used to be big names in the nuclear discussion. But I think it came some time where you could have a whole conference without mentioning Westinghouse. But let's hope that the new administration will bring back nuclear industry to where it used to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Give us your 10-second take on what you're looking for.
Yeah, in 15 years, shut down all coal in the United States and replace it with SMRs. Very simple. And I mean, there are multiple tools in the presidential toolbox to do that. And ultimately, by 2050, you have to shut down all natural gas. That's as simple as it goes. And replace it with SMRs and with renewables. And that's serious. That is serious thing. And we're doing it in European Union. And that's why we need multiple sites and businesses to deploy SMRs. And that's what we're doing in Estonia with Fermi Energia.
Thank you, Kalev. Cosmin.
Well, the one thing that I would say is, yes, giving the signal that the U.S. is looking for to continue its support in being a present nuclear leader, because nuclear projects expand over multiple years and multiple administrations. So the bipartisan support and stewardship towards advancing the nuclear agenda needs to be at a strategic level. And that is why, for example, Romania decided to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the US in developing its civil nuclear sector, because it is part of the strategic relationship and that needs to stay course.
Thank you, Cosmin. And John, the last word is to you, with possibly the most on the line here in the new US administration.
Well, you know, we're very proud that we have a real private-public partnership. You know, we wouldn't be here without the U.S. government, you know, Congress, NRC, DOE, and our private investors, particularly Fluor Corporation. But I'd like to see, if you think in the last decade, a great success story has been the cost of renewables and how they've come down dramatically. $51 billion was, over the last 10 years, was provided to renewables as incentives and tax breaks to help get them where they are today. If we had some of that money in the advanced nuclear community, I think the returns to our government would be phenomenal. And if you had $10 billion of incentives, that could produce over 6 gigawatts of SMR capacity by 2035. I'd like to see more of that happening.
Thank you. I think this was a fantastic note to end on, and it's just been a fascinating conversation. And I'm so grateful to each and every one of you for joining us. So should also say, I think I said this in the green room. I'm not sure if I said it on the panel once we were live, but I think that we've assembled the largest group of people in the highest number of time zones. And I think that this is really, truly a silver lining of the work from home situation that we've all been in for the last 10 months, that we've been able to convene people and have conversations that might not have otherwise taken place. So I think, we're really fortunate to be able to do this. I want to say good night to our North American panelists and to our audience, and thank you for sticking with us. And of course, good afternoon to our audience in Asia, and good morning to Abu Dhabi.